One of the most common questions I get as a believer is, why is there evil in the world if God is good? Now, this is a complicated question, and I've done much more extensive teaching on it, but I ran across a verse this morning that I think gives a perspective that we should really hold, especially as believers. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while people were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, then went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads of grain, the weeds also appeared. And the owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from?" And he answered, "An enemy has done this." The servants asked him, "Then do you want us to go and pull them up?" But he said, "No, because if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot some of the wheat at the same time. Let them both grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers to collect the weeds first, tie them into bundles to be burned, but to gather the wheat into my barns." Now, if you've ever seen wheat with weeds, especially when it's young, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between the two. Like, looking at them side by side, they look almost identical. And the same is true of us when we are immature in our faith. It's almost impossible to tell the difference between us and someone who is worldly. And so the Lord has to let us grow up with that which is evil, because while we are in the process of being immature, if he were to judge everyone according to their works, in many cases, there would be many believers, those who would even become believers, that would be lost in that process, because at the time of their immaturity, they were almost indistinguishable from those who were truly dark and truly evil. This is why we see multiple scriptures that talk about how Jesus isn't slow in coming to bring justice. He's not slow in returning in the way that people think of, but rather he is being patient. The Father is being patient because he doesn't want anyone to be lost. He wants everyone to have time to come to the full maturity, both whether it's someone who is going to ultimately choose evil, that they would have the opportunity to come to full maturity so that when they are judged, there's no room for doubt. They had ample opportunity and they made their choice. And in the same way, those who would choose good, they had ample opportunity, even if it was to the final moment, the final breath of their life. And in that final breath, they finally came to the knowledge of Christ. Even if it's to that moment, his heart is that none would be lost. And so what we oftentimes perceive as God not caring is actually God being patient with us so that we can grow up. And so what does it mean to grow up? Does that mean that God's waiting for us to be perfect, for all of our behaviors to be absolutely perfect and absolutely right? Interestingly, I think we find the answer in that story of the wheat and the tares. So, like we said, when they're in their youth, when they're in their immaturity, they're almost indistinguishable, a wheat and a tare. But when they come to full maturity, when the tare has grown up to its fullness, and the wheat has likewise grown up to its fullness, the primary difference between the two is that the tare remains standing like a stalk, perfectly upright, whereas the wheat begins to grow heavy. The head of the wheat begins to grow heavy. And over time, it begins to bow. You see, we tend to think that maturity in the life of a believer is all about their behaviors. You know, it's like, are they behaving in a way that we expect a believer to behave? And to some extent, there's some truth to that. But you have to remember, again, the wheat and the tare look identical until they're at full maturity. In the same way, you could have a person whose behaviors look perfect, but their heart can still be far from the Lord. The difference, the true difference between a believer, someone who really in their heart of hearts is going to know the Lord or knows the Lord, and somebody who is a tare, somebody whose heart is still full of evil, even if their behaviors look perfect, is that when faced with the person of Jesus Christ, the tare will remain upright in defiance, but the believer will bow before their king. So before you judge a person or a situation, just remember that in its immaturity, the wheat and the tare look almost identical. And it's not until they come to full maturity that you actually find out what their response will be to the Lord. Shh.